passenger side with the crew here, so looks like we made it to Ontario. And for those of you that have been here and have made this drive, one of the things that you will understand very quickly is that Canada is very big indeed, which apparently the size matters. And it's funny because you don't really think about it. Most people that live in their respective countries, Canada included, don't really account for or really even think about how large the landmass of the country really is, right? Because most people kind of live their lives sort of within a couple 100 kilometers or a couple 100 miles of where they live. And so you kind of end up living in this sort of, not a bubble, but it's very easy to forget the scale and size of the landmass, particularly when the population of Canada isn't really all that much compared to many, if not most, other countries. I mean, right now, obviously I'd have to check the statistics, but I think right now the population of Canada is maybe 40 some odd million, in the low 40s. I mean, it might be getting to the upper 40s at this point, but anyway, be that as it may, if you consider the size of the country in terms of land area versus how many people are in it, it's pretty vast. So it's, when you're going, say, from Saskatchewan to Ontario, it's halfway across the country. So basically you can expect, as pretty as this looks, it's a good thing that it does look pretty, because you're going to be looking at this kind of thing for days and days and days and days and days. So this is really what you can expect. And to give you an idea of just how big Canada is, so I'm a transplant. So I moved to Saskatchewan, I guess about 4 years ago-ish at this point, maybe closing in on 5. It's easy to forget where the time goes. And it took about a 4-day drive from Ottawa, the Outaouais, where I'm from, on the Quebec border, to move there. Right? So you try to kind of break it up, so you wind up having somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 10-12 hour drives, and then take breaks, and you can kind of shower and take a shit and all that kind of good stuff that human bodily functions, and eating and that, masticating and all of that good stuff. And one of the things that I noticed, and I like to say, because again, there's a lot of people that don't typically take this drive, right? Because again, most people live in the same sort of area where they grew up, and typically do not move outside a couple of 100 kilometers or a couple of 100 miles. So it's very easy, as I say, to forget just how big the country is that if you look at a map of Canada and Ontario, and if you're going from Ottawa's fairly southern. Like, it's not technically considered southern Ontario. That'd be like eastern Ontario, southeastern Ontario, maybe, depending on how picky you are and how things look on the map. But you are getting fairly close to the New York border. So, for example, if you live in Ottawa, or more specifically the Ottawa Valley, so Carleton Place, Almont, Mississippi Mills, Smiths Falls, that sort of thing, Brockville, Frankville, that sort of area, Franktown, Ashton, that sort of thing. You're already pretty close to the American border. So if you live in Kingston, you could be pretty much across the U.S. border right away. And if you're in the Thousand Islands, so Gananoque, Kingston, Quinte area, it's not that far. So even if you're in Ottawa proper, I mean, you're going to be across the U.S. border in about 2 hours, maybe a little less. If you grew up in the valley, you're also going to be in the valley. If you're in the valley, you're going to be able to cross the border in maybe 45 minutes, an hour and a half, depending on how close you are to Prescott, at which point you're going to cross into Ogdensburg. But the interesting thing is if you kind of look at the line that you have to draw if you're driving to the prairies, so Saskatchewan, Alberta, and sort of the end game of Manitoba, so you're halfway across the country. I like to say that Ontario goes on forever, which I'm sure many other people in the country would agree in more ways than one. But Ontario just goes on for probably 60-70% of the trip. So when you go to the prairies from Ontario, well, particularly from the Ottawa area, the National Capital Region, you're actually going to be, of those 3 or 4 days, 2 or 3 of those days, you're still going to be Ontario. Because if you were to draw a stick on the map of Ontario, you're actually going from the bottom of the province all the way to the top, and then you're basically doing a hard left. So you start your drive, and you're wondering, is Ontario ever going to fucking end? Because you're driving through Ontario for 2 days or whatever it is, and then as soon as you hit the Manitoba border, it's like somebody hit the fast forward button, and then you're like, oh, we're finally in Manitoba after X amount of days or however many days it is, and it's like, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, done, right? And then it's not too bad. But if you consider, to give you an idea of the sheer size of the country, if you're going to drive from one side of the country to the other, and the United States is pretty big too. So the other thing you have to account for is 4 days is halfway. 3-4 days is halfway. So it's going to take you a solid week, a little bit more than a week, to get from one side of Canada to the other. That's pretty big. That's pretty big. The United States is big.